talk a little this morning about mind and ego specifically. What is this pesky ego? Oh no, should I? What is this pesky ego? Let's do that. So this is Swami Niranjananda. He's the steward leader of Bihar School of Yoga. So that's an image of Swamiji. He came to his guru, Swami Satchidananda, who was a principal disciple of Swami Shivananda. Swami Satchidananda stayed in India, and he started an organization called Munger Trust in very destitute areas of India, Munger and Bihar. Established a great yoga school there. And Swami Niranjananda came to him at 11 years old. We hear already awake. So we hear there's lore, of course, in all the traditions. And these books in the library on the lower left are a set of the books from Bihar School or Munger Trust. The book that you're utilizing is from them. They are as far as we can tell, as far as what we've seen, they are the best documented, the best written yoga manuals, instruction manuals in anywhere that we've seen. Quite amazing. They're written in proper English, easily understandable English, and very deep, profoundly deep, sage, seer kind of depth. So mind, in Sanskrit, mind, at least two names. Mahat is one of them, and Antakarana. Antakarana meaning inner instrument. And we'll start here, just an overview of the fourfold mind. And from a yoga psychology perspective, what is it? How does yoga psychology, how do the yoga sages and seers look at the mind? It won't be substantially different from other traditions. The difference is the depth. The other difference is this. In the West, Western psychology is an outgrowth of criminal pathological behaviors. But in India, you know this. In India, that's not where the study of the mind starts. In India, the study of the mind starts in the clear mind, in the pure mind, in the depth of mind, the universal mind or the great mind, big mind, as I think I heard you saying a couple of days ago. And so the seers and sages had a completely different reason of looking at the mind and studying the mind than we did in the West. In the West, we had behavioral issues, and so it was necessary within society to figure out what was the cause of the behavioral issues. People would kill each other, and in the West, we're not very grounded. And so Europe and America is both, North America both. And India, very grounded, interestingly enough. Not the criminal behaviors, not the societal issues that cropped up in the West from a couple of hundred years ago. And so, which is why the West was the inventor of the straitjacket, and the West was the inventor of what's the surgery to cut? Lobotomy. The lobotomy was invented in the West, and so the study of psychology from the West is from that perspective. It's always about fixing something. It's not about understanding the principle of mind and going from there. In the East, it's the opposite. In the East, the study of the mind has to do with freedom. Study of the mind in the East has to do with freedom. So what is the difference between freedom and bondage? It's not about criminal behavior, not about bad societal behavior, although those are from bondage, of course. But it's what is it that binds a man and what is it that frees a man, and where is the freedom, and how to offer this way of freedom with an understanding of what is the bondage. And so the yoga traditions are all coming from this place of compassion. They're not coming from a place of trying to imprison someone or trying to study someone's criminal behavior. And so they're unique in this way. And so the study of mind is, we find in the East, when we study the Eastern way of looking at mind, we find it to be quite instructive, quite intuitive, much more so than any of the psychological systems. Jung, of course, very, very close. Jung seems to be an awakened one himself and had a great interest in the superconscious, in that absolute. So Eastern tradition, yoga tradition, we look at mind, Mahat or Antakarana's 4 functions. And there you go. And the 4 functions of this higher mind are ahamkara, or ego, that's the I identity, chitta, the impressions, memories, and samskaras, buddhi, intelligence, what we call intellect, and manas, the finite sequential mind, what we call the subconscious mind, the reactive mind. Also the emotional mind, the seat of the emotional responses, although ego has a lot to do with that. In yoga, using the word mind is like using the word body. When one uses the word body, one is not referring to any particular part, organ, or system of the body, but the total body comprised of many different systems, organs, and functions. All these various components are identified in the word body. In the same manner, the word mind refers to the total mind, which consists of 4 identifiable functions. And to study one's own mind and one's own character and transform oneself really requires this understanding of the 4 functions of the mind. It's not 4 minds, and they're not distinct and separate from each other either, but they work in a cooperative way. Like the body is a cooperative society, the mind is a cooperative society. And so he describes like this. And this description is very precise and beautiful. Ahamkara, that's ego. He says the ego is the first evolute. So in the evolution or the creation or the projection, however we call this world show, the first is the ahamkara or ego. So he says it's the first evolute function or product of Mahat, the mind, is ego, ahamkara. This ego or self-identity is an awareness of me existing as an independent unit, an independent person. It's fair to understand first that it's a feeling of. It doesn't have anything to do with truth. Feelings don't have anything to do with truth. They're feelings. Is that correct? Yeah. So it doesn't have anything to do with truth, but it is a feeling. And it's really the beginning of the feeling. And it's very specific as he describes it. It is the feeling of being an independent unit or an independent being. Independent from what? Everything else. There you go. And it's right in there. That feeling is right in there because there has to be an else. And so that idea of else is actually arising from this feeling. It's starting as a feeling, not an idea. It's often called an idea, but you'll recognize it within the personage, within this mask that you're wearing. You'll recognize it as the feeling of being separate, or the feeling of being incomplete, or the feeling of being alone. So that's the beginning. And he says it's also the realization that I exist. Now, in the meditative state, there's no realization I exist. Correct, Harry? So as we come out of this meditative state, or we come out of unity, it's that feeling I exist, or that realization that I exist, is ego sense. It's ahamkara. So coming out of the unity right at that point, that's where it is. The first thing. In a world of things, it's the first thing. If you catch that, it's a thing. It's an object. And it's the first. So you could say adiyahamkara. You identify with the body because you exist in the body. As you come out of this unity and you see that you are in a body. Now that's a feeling, isn't it? That you're in a body. I suppose some of us have had experiences where you didn't feel like you were in this body, correct? Yes, indeed. But it is a feeling that I exist in this body. Hari is a very good meditator, so I'll often refer to him to help catch it. Yes? Because in the meditation, everything is perfect. Yeah. There's no thought about unity. There's just the absence of the feeling of separation. And so if you catch it, it's that feeling of separation that we're dealing with. That's the ahamkara. The feeling that I exist. And then coming out of it as you were, now you're back, as it were, in this body. Not really. So we can say, as it were. As it were, in this body. That's the feeling, isn't it? I'm in this body. It's a very strong, persistent feeling, isn't it? Yeah. And thus the identification with the body. That's also ego sense. So this identification with the body. I am afraid, I'm warm, I'm cold, all of that. This is all starting here. Because these are statements only applying to the body. So you exist, you identify with yourself because you exist. You identify with the body because you exist in the body. So we'll move on here in a moment, but these points seem important as we recognize what we're dealing with. What is the cause of our suffering? What are we holding on to? What are we stuck with? And so these statements, as I say, it's very precise, the language here. It's so amazing. You exist. You exist. In meditative state, do you exist, Hari?
There's an awareness, but...
So you can say yes. Yeah. Of course you do. Yeah, of course you do. Yeah. But you can say from here, looking back at it, but it's a pure existence. Yeah. There's not even an idea I exist. There's not a feeling that I exist. Correct?
Right.
Yeah, but I exist, clearly. Because from that place is the arising. Yes? Yeah. And the arising can be very fast, but you like to prolong it. We see you. You don't want to arise. I don't want any arising here.
So the arising means joining?
No, dear.
Uniting with...
No, seemingly. Seemingly. It's as if this experience, which we call experience of unity, because it's the absence of any experience of separation. That the feeling of separation arises, but also the feeling of existence arises. Now, I exist. Well, it's true, I exist. But what is the I saying I exist? And this is ahamkara. It's the beginning of ahamkara. It's the beginning of the ego sense. And since I exist, this is what he's sharing, since I exist and I find myself in this body, then I exist in this body, which, because of the qualities of this consciousness, which is all-inclusive, which will therefore include whatever it observes to be itself, then I am this body. Then the feeling is I am this body. So you exist, you identify with yourself because you exist. You identify with the body because you exist in the body. You identify with the mind because you can experience the mind. The knowledge that I live, I exist, I am, this is my body, this is my mind, this is my life, is ahamkara, self-identity or self-awareness. Aham means I, akara means form. So it's the conjunction of the I with the form. That's the experience. Now, whose form is it? Just for a moment. Just to come back to reality for a moment. Whose form is it? Source. Just this form?
No.
No, all of the forms. But I and form, one. That's a feeling. That's ahamkara or ego. So this is, when we hear the term ego sense, this is what's being discussed. Ego sense is a feeling. It's genuinely a feeling. But it's so deep within you that you take it to be the truth and you'll pick at anything else, not picking at that because it's held sacrosanct. It's held sacred. It's held as this is me and I have to protect me. And so the beginning of our journey in the world, but also the beginning of the suffering. Okay, so that's ahamkara. Just briefly review of the other functions and we get the idea of how they work together, and then we'll take a few minutes on dealing with ahamkara, dealing with this ego. So chitta, that's the dimension where karmas and samskaras are stored in the deep unconscious. So we call memory, the center for memory. So there are memories, you're aware of memories. That's called chitta in Sanskrit. It's okay, just the name for it. It's a function of mind. Again, mind is one, the mind principle is one, but it's a specific function of the mind. Buddhi is the third function of mahat or ahamkara, and that's rationality and logic. So where the choices are made. You did this to me, I will do that. So not reactive, but action. Action. So buddhi is about action. The organs of action, as it were, report to the buddhi, to the intellect. The intellect chooses what to do or what to try to do and what not to do or what to try not to do, like that. Ultimately, there's the potential to exert, but you might want to get up and a big rock is on you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can get up, but you choose, I want to get up. And that's function of buddhi, intellect. And of course, also, I'm suffering here. I'm coming to understand that the cause of my suffering is not because I'm not getting what I want. I'm coming to understand that what I want is not really what I want, and that it's not really going to give me the happiness that I want. So we say the beginning of awakening, but of course that's buddhi, that's intellect. And that's what we're discussing. So if there was no buddhi, no intelligence, then there would be no recognition or interaction of the individual with the sense objects. So this whole urge to explore and to identify and to name and all of that, this is also the function of buddhi or the intellect. He says buddhi is the active factor of the mind, connecting the individual with the world. We see in the human birth a relatively well-developed buddhi or intellect, because we see a lot of activity related to curiosity with things, curiosity with people, and different colors and shapes and sizes, and naming and categorizing and all of this. The animals, as we look at the animal kingdom, not so much. So the buddhi, the intellect, not so much developed. The plant kingdom, less developed, although there is some rudimentary function there. There are choices still that are made, even within the plant kingdom. So the other three factors, and we touch on the fourth, the other three, actually all four are existing throughout. Even the atom is made of the mind stuff, or within the mind stuff. So even the atom has the mental function, and we can see it, and the scientists are seeing it now. It's very interesting. You know, the study of subatomic particles and quantum behaviors, and how it is that the energy field collapses upon observation. That's pointing to an intelligence that's there, and that intelligence, of course, is within the atom and the subatomic particles. Om, and this mind, this Mahat, is this intelligence reflected out into this apparent world, creating, as it were, creating this apparent world. And then the fourth function is manas. And manas, he says, is also translated as mind. So sometimes it'll get confusing in yoga, because sometimes we'll say mind is the total mind, and sometimes we'll say mind is only the subconscious mind, which is the manas. Manas, interestingly enough, the word man, human, is coming from this as well in the genealogy of the languages. We see that man is mind is man. What is the man made of? What is the human made of? So the fourth function of Mahat is manas. It's also translated as mind, due to there is often confusion about which mind one is talking about, the lower mind or the higher mind. Manas is not mind. Its function is sankalpa and vikalpa, clarity and confusion, focus and distraction. The mind is this manas is the reactive aspect of mind. He says it's not actually mind. Interesting concept. It's entirely reactive. The thinking, what we consider to be thinking, where one really is rationating and considering, is not manas in terms of the functions. It is the buddhi, the intellect. But if you look at our lives, until we really choose to begin to live consciously, how much of what we call thought is reactive, just the bubbling up of the sankalpa vikalpa. The sankalpa is an arising of a tendency, and the vikalpa is the imagination, or the arising of a form. So, oh my God, how long can we take? We can see a form. Oh, in a supermarket, we can pick up a box, and what's the form? Well, form or a name. Chocolate. We look at the label chocolate, and how long could we be in our imagination in vikalpa about just reading the word chocolate? And that's sankalpa vikalpa. It's this process. When I talked about the example of the waterfall and no waterfall, that's the breaking of the cycle of sankalpa vikalpa. So sankalpa is the word, the name, or the form arising within the mind stuff. And then vikalpa is the imagination. So form arises in front of the eyes. And in the memory, chitta, name, bill. And then vikalpa, imagination, bill, good, bad, white, black, man, transvestite. I mean, whatever, all of this is completely imaginary. Vikalpa, sankalpa, vikalpa. So what we call thought is not really thought. It's what's called in Sanskrit sankalpa, vikalpa. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's not really thought. It's not really thinking. It's certainly not conscious. And we hear in yoga 75,000 thoughts a day on average, something like this. 75,000 thoughts a day. How many of them sankalpa vikalpa? 74,000? 74,500? How many about food? Sankalpa vikalpa, right? And so this is when we hear yoga, chitta vritti nirodha, the stilling of the whirlpools. That's this sankalpa vikalpa process, which is coming from, and it's not that there's a bad here, an enemy or something. We're just talking about what is. And who is really here? And what is all this stuff made of? What is this mind stuff made of? Who is it made of? So this is the arising of world and the illusion both. Oh, just a little bit about ego sense and control of the ego sense. Just 5 or 10 minutes, just a little. There's a chapter in here called Management of the Fourfold Mind, how to manage this mind instead of it managing you. You see, in this whole sankalpa vikalpa, it's running you. And it is running you ragged. Yes, dear? Yes? It is running you ragged. You have no time to really think. You have no time to reflect. You have no time to be free because you are constantly serving the mind. And so yoga is the path of freedom. And so what does freedom mean? Freedom means managing the mind. You could say so many different ways, right? Taking your life back. Ending the whole victimhood and savior and perpetrator cycle. Ending that whole thing, crashing it. Because that's all this sankalpa vikalpa. It's all this. But the intellect, as it were, is very much under the control of the sankalpa vikalpa at this time. So, as a child, my mother constantly was getting angry. And so you see what this is. And then I every time it happened, it hurt. What did it hurt? Well, that's the ego sense. You can look at it now and see. Yeah. So it was an attack against the feeling of I'm here and you're there and all I want is love and all of this. And so, and I learned to protect myself. I learned ways to protect myself. And so, and now that's this conditioned mind. And now we put this conditioned mind in the supposed world and look at what sankalpa vikalpa does. Right? Someone says something, and all of the protection mechanisms arising. Where are they? In the subconscious. Yeah. So at some point they were considered and reflected upon, choices were made, and then they become part of the aspects of the manas, conditioned self. So, okay. So just a little about the subtle principle of the greater mind. And here he's differentiating greater mind, lesser mind. Lesser mind, manas. The sankalpa vikalpa, the subconscious, the reactive. Greater mind, interestingly, the ego, the identity. And the intellect, the function of rationalization. The only difference between the saints and the sages and us, they have the same mind stuff to work with. The only difference is the development of the higher mind and the realization of the truth and the change of the identity. And so this identity, ego sense, and the intellect or the intelligence are said to be higher mind faculties. Because with them you can raise yourself up out of the bondage and you can be free. With them. The identity can be changed when one realizes, and the ego sense itself shift. So that no longer will you feel separate. No longer will you feel as if you are this body. But this is the work. He says the subtle principle of the greater mind is ahamkara. It's subtle because it's almost like space. It's almost non-existent. How do you find it? How many people actually find the ego? Only a yogi finds the ego. Only one who's not afraid to do introspection. Only one who's not afraid to strip away all that they thought was themselves will find the ego and what it is and what is it made of. And finally, take it as you take all of the childhood toys and set it on the shelf and say, no longer ruled by you. I am Shiva. I am the Absolute. I am one with you and all of this. Not the ego expressed as arrogance, but the ego which is inherent and gives everyone a self-identity, self-awareness and knowledge of being myself, of I am. He says there are 4 ego expressions. The ego is connected to and subject to the meanderings of avidya or ignorance, abhinivesha, maya, and asmita, all meaning in a way the same. Avidya means ignorance, and one of the actions of the ego is to suppress knowledge. So functioning ego, a strong ego sense, suppresses knowledge. There has to be, you see, an active force, because we come to face the fact that life feels a certain way, but it is another. That means we have been hoodwinked. We have accepted a falsehood as the center of our life. We have accepted a falsehood. Who did that? And we'll find out it was a plant. It was intentional. And there's some sort of game involved in terms of freeing oneself. But it suppresses knowledge. Look at the way it works. We'll close here. We need to. But look at the way it works. Okay, I'll give you an example. I used to be with Swami Premananda, and I would sit in his class, and I would sit in the back because I was shy. Shyness isn't the same as humility, by the way. We learned this. Shyness is trying to hide yourself, because you don't want anyone to see you, because you see yourself as defective somehow, and you don't want anyone to catch it. And so that's what shyness is born of. And so we forgive and all of this, but this is shyness. It's because of a false view of ourselves that shyness is there. And I was very shy, and I would sit in the back, but I had all these questions and I wanted to know. And Swamiji would start to talk, and it was very interesting. But I observed that immediately when he started making sense, I felt sleepy. Have you ever felt that? And so that's avidya. That's this ego principle of avidya, which is it's really actively trying to hide you from knowledge. Yes. Otherwise, no world. And so, like this. And of course, I had to be brave, right? I had to learn to be brave. I had to learn to go sit up in front. I had to learn to remember all the techniques about paying attention so that I could actually keep myself to pay attention. And then, of course, how else does the mind work? Well, what's important is what we forget, and what's minimal, nothing. It doesn't mean anything. Bupkis. It's like somebody said something to us 20 years ago, and somehow we think that's important to reflect upon. When we see them, or we have an idea about them, or we think about why are we not happy, and we consider, the job I should have gotten 20 years ago, 10 years ago, this person that I wanted to spend my life with, and they didn't love me, and they misunderstood me. But what's important? God alone here. Forget. As soon as this stuff arises, forget. That's also this avidya principle of ego. Very crafty. The ego is guided by Maya, illusion, and identifies with Maya. So the illusion, the magic show. The ego identifies with it. It's of it, and it's guided by it. It is Maya which makes it see itself as big and others as small, if we have that feeling. We have the feeling? Look at it. And it's not even that people are bad or any of that. But look at it, because don't you have the feeling that you are at the center of the universe? Doesn't everything revolve around you? And then in the very well-developed ego sense, then of course, I'm the one to be satisfied here. Why not? Because this entire world is around me. So look and see how it can become so perverted like that. But the sensation that it's around me, and it's in fact accurate, but not around me as a separate individual. In truth, there's no separate. There's a statement translated from the Vedas. This infinity is as if centered in an infinitely small point and expanding out in infinite radius around it. And you find yourself at that center. You're always at that center. That's the truth. But you are also the expansion. Truth. So Swamiji gets to talking about, and really it's enough for this morning. Maybe we have something to work with. The work for us is to manage this ego. It's not a bad person, but it is incorrect. It is a false flag. When we talk about false flag operations, it is the original false flag operation. Every other false flag operation comes from it. It is the original. And it is the cause of the holding on to that which is causing you to suffer. Something happened in childhood, and now we live with fear the rest of our lives. Or anger because someone took my toy away at 4 years old. You see, even the littlest things. And they're all built upon a falsehood, you see. And so what is the way out? Well, the way out, he uses the term here, egodectomy. The way out is to manage it. The way out is to not live according to it, but to correct it. To correct it. To develop a proper identity. And that is not like this, as much as we wish it were. It doesn't happen like that. Because we have to face so much that we've been holding on to. This false. But this is what yoga is about. This is what yoga life is about. This is what, not just yoga, spiritual life. This is what awakening is. To be awake is to be really awake is not just to have an awakening experience. It's not. It's not just to know, to have spiritual knowledge and know that this is all the one. To be fully awake means to have ended the identification with this limited body and limited mind. Does it mean perfection in the personage? No, it does not. It does not come with it. Upon awakening, there is still much work to be done. But it means the end of the identification. And so the work is on this, is on working with this feeling, working with this identification. And through all of the practices, and all of them are in integral yoga, they're all about helping us to get beyond this limited identification. Questions or comments?
What about somebody who's had war veterans? They have PTSD.
Yes.
In the Western sense, they're diagnosed with PTSD.
Yes.
And so they'll hear a car backfire and think it's a gunshot. They're back in Vietnam.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
So I think Sankapa and Vikalpa, those will be playing in there because they're either imagining something or they're having a reaction, and yet
Absolutely.
it's impairing or impacting their life. So what would this approach? How would they get started with that, if that makes any sense?
I'm sure it does.
Versus,
Sure it does.
the Western approach might be psychotherapy or
Yes.
trauma release, which might have its place.
They can and they do.
But
Yes.
still.
Yeah. So the cure is always proper identification, transcending the identification of separate body, mind. I am this. I am here. You are there. So the cure is always finally that. And the cure is what all of the saints and sages and all the traditions are exemplifying and helping us to take, to learn how to take. And it's hard. And it's scary and all of this. But it is step by step. It seems like in this culture now, this particular PTSD is an obnoxious one. I mean, it's very, very deep. But it seems like in society today, we all have that PTSD. I feel like we could all be diagnosed with it. And so, yes, this time is called Kali Yuga. It's a very difficult time in this way because everybody's arguing with everybody else like that. And so trauma is everywhere. And, how many girls and women have been raped or sexually abused by the age of 18. And, the numbers are astounding. And even at some point, we generally will even take this abusive way of life as the real life. And so we'll get deeper and deeper. So it's not just the war veterans. There are practices within the system of yoga that exist in the other traditions as well, such as breath and breath awareness and coming back to the breath and pranayama, asanas, which will start to bring one's mind slowly, bit by bit, out of the pure reactive, pure sankalpa, vikalpa, and help us to learn to utilize the intellect again. And it's bit by bit. But all of us are experiencing, the moment is where the infinity is. And this life is lived moment after moment after moment. It's only ever one moment at a time. And so the experience is, if we look over a period of time at our life, we see in some moments we're aware and we have the faculty of intellect available to us.
The buddhi.
Yeah, the buddhi, yes.
So
and we're able to utilize it.
And the buddhi can be free from sankalpa, vikalpa. If it's free from vikalpa, sankalpa, then it's actually functioning optimally in the sense of, I'd like to do this and not that thing.
Yes.
But I'm not doing it because I'm reacting or my mind's clouded.
Exactly. And the buddhi is when we talk about awakening, soul is already awake. But soul is not experiencing this I-ness. It's when the pure soul is coming out into the world, as it were, when this ego sense arises, that's where the trouble is beginning. And so the intellect, though, the buddhi is the instrument that's in our hands. It's a divine instrument that allows us to awaken. And Buddha means the awakened intellect. So this is where the Buddha said, I'm not special, I'm you. There have been countless Buddhas before me, there will be countless Buddhas after. And he was very clear, I'm awake. I'm awake. So this is, and what we find is that in these very serious states of PTSD, which, as we said, we're all experiencing at some level, the sankalpa vikalpa, in the company of the feeling of being separate, And it's the sankalpa vikalpa then is generally about protecting oneself. It's the reactive and trauma states. So fight or flight, this kind of activity is what's dominating the awareness at this point. And the intellect is effectively blocked. Whatever function there is from the intellect is serving this cycle in those states. And of course, we see that even everything can shut down right there, and we go into a coma, or the body starts to shake, and the whole mind is just all wrapped up in extreme cases. And still, there will be a moment where the function of the intellect is relatively clear and relatively pure. And one will have the capacity to reflect back on that and say, this won't do. I need help. And so it's also that intellect that something deeper that's calling us, that says, it is possible to be happy. It is possible to be free of this. It is possible to go beyond. This is the basis of religion, and it's within every single one of us. It is the deep reality of every single one of us. It is the inner guru that it's calling, and the intellect can't help but hear it sometimes. And so choose to make changes. And so everyone will catch a break. Our dear Gopala was here with us for 4 or 5 days, and some of us know him in person. He came first 3.5 years ago, and it's not me or this ashram or any of that. There are systems that help us to awaken. And through the grace of God, I was brought into one. I was poster child for all of this stuff. Such abhorrent behaviors. And so, he had lived on the street and heroin addict and all of this stuff. And so PTSD, completely reactive. And just you could say, hopeless. People who would see him would say hopeless because, he's living in a box. He doesn't care about life. He doesn't care about anyone else. He just wants a fix. He shares openly. He doesn't mind us sharing. And yet there was something there, it's always here, that motivated him to something more. And he experienced some kindnesses. And then he went to prison and he couldn't. And so he had to get dry for a while. And then his intellect, the question started, there's better than this. I have experienced the greatest pleasure that's possible in this earth, and it doesn't provide happiness. So he got it. And so in terms of the entry, asanas, pranayama, the yamas and niyamas, understanding them, etc., in the system of yoga, yes. And then it's possible to make progress. And then the intellect purifies enough, that is, it separates enough from this ego sense that it begins to venture off and ask interesting questions. Finally, who am I? And like this. And the process goes from here. Through grace. Through grace. We've met many who had served as soldiers. No one was ever what they did. But many who served as soldiers and had terrible cases of PTSD, who through the system of yoga were able to get beyond it. And then come back out into the world and help others who were suffering from the same.
So why aren't VAs, Veteran Affairs hospitals around the country, for the United States, that is, I'm sure it's all over the world, enrolling more yoga teachers?
Avidya.
We
each, the collective society is the totality of our own individual states. And so as we look at the total, we're seeing the totality of the individual states. And so we each have to do our own work. And it doesn't work unless we choose to do it. If somebody does it for you, it won't work. You get addicted to it, just like anything else. When we have gong therapy, and people will say, should I do this? And they love going, but they get addicted to it. You know, we think that it's a practice of yoga, but no, you have to do it yourself. You have to have your own resolve. If you don't have your own resolve, you can't wake up. You have to have your own resolve. You have to do your own work, and there are systems to help you to do it. Paramahansa Yogananda was asked, why is there evil in the world? You know, and this is what we're talking about, these great evils, and society doesn't care and all of that. No, they're both. There's caring and there's non-caring, both, yes? They're both here. They're both here. There's darkness and light both here. And he said, why are there both? Why is there evil in the world? And he says, there's evil and there is good so that you can choose. And so we're learning here. We're souls. We came in. We got exposed to this. And now we have to live our life. We have to learn. And what finally do we come to? We come to, oh my God, I want to be free of this. And there's a way.
So Swamiji, if the collective mind, especially in Kali Yuga, which is the in the evolution, Kali Yuga is probably the longest compared to Satya Yuga, right?
It doesn't make any difference how long it is. Today, right now is this moment.
Yeah, so this
Madan, right now is this moment. What choice do you make in this moment? That's all that matters.
So this moment, the collective mind is struggling with a lot of conflict and a lot of despair around the world and a lot of poverty and whatnot. So if that is happening, then one should be rushing to the light, and there's more effort.
Absolutely. So you have to do it.
Right.
You have to do it. You cannot count on anyone else. You cannot be upset about anyone else not doing it. You have to do it. This is the lesson. You have to do it. Why are you here today? Why did you come last night? You have to do it. Don't count on anyone else. All the support you could want is here. You have to do it. You have to bring the light. Don't talk about anyone else. You have to bring the light. It's within you. You know it.
So the practice of yoga is much more important.
The practice of yoga is in the life. You practice yoga at a desk. You practice yoga when you're driving your loads to your customers. You practice yoga when you're in the court. You practice yoga when you're in the park. The practice of yoga is about practicing the awareness of the all-abiding truth here, and about practicing the virtues, practice of kindness, practice of forgiveness, practice of openness, practice of satyam, telling the truth, resisting that tendency to lie in order to look good. These are all practice of yoga. And it's not on the mat. Part of it is on the mat. And this practice, those of us who know something, and this is the message, this is why I'm being asked to get out of here for a while and go meet with our people who know something, but need to stand up, need to recognize it's up to them. It's up to you, my dear. You've been given the support you need. You ask questions, you'll get the answers. Don't expect anyone to force feed you. It doesn't happen that way. You have to ask the questions. It only goes that way. You have to ask the questions. And whenever you ask the question, you see it. The answer comes, doesn't it? Yes. So you just need to know that. It is the Guru, which is inside, and it will appear outside as needed. But when you ask the question, and you really have genuine, serious intent, and you open yourself, the answer will come. It might be even in reading a book in a different tradition and then hearing something. Yes? So please, time to wake up. And it doesn't happen like that. So just step by step, just make the commitment. Take a resolve to a virtue. Get your practice back.
Right.
Yeah. And teach one day a week. You can do. You're a great teacher. Please do it. We need it. All right, any questions or comments there?
Yes. So Gopinath is saying, is ego the subject of all predicates or sentences?
The ego senses. It's a longer answer than that, Gopinath. I'll share something. The Vedantins will say something about the I and the meaning of the I, the word I. Here, I can say something quickly. It's said that the meaning of the word I, that there are three meanings for it. And the first one is when we're not awake. Yeah, and there, the word I is referring to what we seem to be. And so this is in the state of avidya. We say I and you. And the second and third have to do with the one who has awakened and who no longer identifies with the body or the mind. And the second use of it will be just like we use it, but with the understanding that it's just conversational. So they might say I, but you have an idea that they're talking about that, but they're just using it to converse with us. And the third is I being the great I, and Gopinath. So in this way, I can't say ego sense really, because there is a meaning of the word I which is all inclusive, and it's not different from we. And so the one who's awake has the understanding of what the word I means. Okay, we should close. Final prayers in Arati, page 174, and the Kirtan book, and we'll have the short close. Sorry. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyama Mritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyama Mritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyama Mritat Om Shānti Shānti Shāntihi. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, let us abide in thee forever and ever. Humble Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai. And for all of the saints and sages of all of the traditions, Jai.